why we're in the midst of an egregious bubble. This industry is sold by keeping things vague and knowing that most people don't dig much deeper than a headline, a problem I simply do not have. This industry is effectively in service of two companies, OpenAI and Nvidia, who pump headlines out through endless contracts between them or subsidiaries or investments to give the illusion of activity. OpenAI has now promised over $400 billion in the next 4 years, though honestly, they might owe about $1 trillion with all the data centers they're signed up for. All of these are egregious sums for a company that have already forecasted billions in losses, with no clear explanation as to how it will afford any of this beyond "we need more money" and the vague hope that there's another SoftBank or Microsoft waiting in the wings to swoop in and save the day. Now, I'm going to walk you through where I see this industry today and why I see no future for it beyond a horrible, fiery car wreck. While everybody reasonably harps on about hallucinations, which, to remind you, is when a model authoritatively states something that isn't true, the truth of why that's bad is far more complex and actually far worse than it seems. You cannot rely on a large language model to do what you want. Even the most highly tuned models on the most expensive and intricate platforms can't actually be relied upon to do exactly what you want. And I know some people might say, well, yes, they do.
Get started
Every
here in a
time,
second. Working on
100% of the time.
something.
A hallucination isn't just when these models say something that isn't true. It's when they decide to do something wrong because it seems the most likely thing to do, or when a coding model decides to go on a wild goose chase, failing the user and burning a ton of money in the process. The advent of reasoning models, those engineered to think through problems in a way reminiscent of a human, but it's not thinking, they don't think, they have no consciousness. They literally, you ask them something and they break down what the prompt might mean and then choose, it's not thinking. And the expansion of what people are trying to use LLMs for demands that the definition of an AI hallucination be widened, not merely referring to factual errors, but fundamental errors in understanding the user's request or intent, or what constitutes a task, in part because these models, as I said, cannot think and do not know anything. However successful a model might be in generating something good once, it will also often generate something bad. Or it'll generate the right thing, but in an inefficient and oververbose fashion. You do not know what you're going to get each time, and hallucinations multiply with the complexity of the thing you're asking for, or whether a task contains multiple steps, which is a fatal blow to the idea of agents. You can add as many levels of intrigue and reasoning as you want, but large language models cannot be trusted to do something correctly, or even consistently, let alone every time. Model companies have successfully convinced everybody that the issue is that users are prompting the models wrong, and that the people need to be trained to use AI, but what they're doing is training people to explain away the inconsistencies of large language models, and to assume individual responsibility for what is an innate flaw in how these fucking things work. Large language models are also uniquely expensive. Many mistakenly try and claim that this is like the dot-com boom or Uber, but the basic unit economics of generative AI are insane. Providers must purchase tens or hundreds of thousands of GPUs, each costing $50,000 to $70,000 apiece, and the hundreds of millions of or billions of dollars of infrastructure that goes around them are so expensive and hard to install. And that's without mentioning things like staffing or construction or power or water or even permitting. Then you turn them on and immediately they start losing you money. Despite hundreds of billions of GPUs sold, nobody seems to actually make any of it, other than Nvidia, of course, the company that makes them, and resellers like Dell and Supermicro who buy the GPUs, put them in servers, and sell them to other people. Now, if you're an eager listener, I would love to hear from you on one question, and this is just something that's been bouncing around my head. Supermicro. Is Nvidia a customer of Supermicro? They're a customer. Supermicro is a huge customer of Nvidia. I read something like 70% of their cost of goods sold is buying GPUs. But I read that Nvidia was a customer of them, but I can't find anything else. Reach out, easy@betteroffline.com if you've got any thoughts there. Anyway, but back to those resellers. This arrangement works out great for Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, and terribly for everybody else. Today I'm going to explain the insanity of the situation we find ourselves in and why I continue to do this work undeterred. The bubble has entered its most pornographic, aggressive, and destructive stage, where the more obvious it becomes that we're all cooked here in AI land, the more ridiculous the generative AI industry will act. A dark juxtaposition against every new study that says generative AI does not work, or news story about ChatGPT's uncanny ability to activate mental illness in people. And we're going to start looking at one company, Nvidia, which now dominates the stock market and has taken extraordinary and dangerous measures to sustain growth that is, to any sane person, completely unsustainable and unrealistic on every level. But let's start simple. NVIDIA is a hardware company that sells GPUs, including consumer GPUs that you'd see in a modern gaming PC. But when you read someone say GPU within the context of AI, they mean enterprise-focused GPUs like the A100, H100, H200, and more modern GPUs like the Blackwell series B200 and GB200, which combines two GPUs with an NVIDIA CPU. This is all complex sounding, but I want you to have the groundwork. These GPUs cost anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 and require tens of thousands of dollars more of infrastructure, networking to cluster these server racks of GPUs together to provide compute, and massive cooling systems to deal with the massive amounts of heat they produce, as well as servers themselves that they run on, which typically use top-of-the-line data center CPUs and contain vast quantities of high-speed memory and storage. While the GPU itself is likely the most expensive single item within an AI server, the other costs, and I'm not even factoring in the actual physical building that the server lives in, or the water or electricity that you use as well, all this crap adds up. I've mentioned NVIDIA because it has a virtual monopoly in this space. Generative AI effectively requires NVIDIA GPUs, in part because it's the only company really making the kinds of high-powered cards that generative AI demands, and because NVIDIA created something called CUDA, C-U-D-A, a collection of software tools that lets programmers write software that runs on GPUs, which were traditionally used primarily for rendering graphics in games. While there are some open-source alternatives, as well as alternatives from Intel with its Arc GPUs and AMD, NVIDIA's main rival in the consumer space, these aren't nearly as mature or feature-rich. CUDA's been around for 10, 15 years now, and they really knew what they were doing. They also bought a company called Mellanox, which did the high-speed networking back in 2019, I think, for $6 billion. Anyway, due to the complexities of AI models, one cannot just stand up a few of these GPUs either. You need clusters of thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of them for it to be worthwhile, making any investment in GPUs in the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, especially considering they require completely different data center architecture to make them run. You've probably read a bunch of stuff about crypto miners turning into AI data center providers. These crypto data centers have to be knocked down and replaced. You can't just put the same GPUs in. It isn't going to work. And with the new Blackwell ones, the brand new ones, and then the Rubins following them, same deal. A common request, like asking a generative AI model to pass through thousands of lines of code and make a change or an addition, may use multiples of these $50,000 GPUs at the same time. And so, if you aspire to serve thousands or millions of concurrent users, you need to spend big. Really, really, really big. It's these factors, the vendor lock-in, the ecosystem, and the fact that generative AI really only works when you're buying GPUs at scale, that underpin the rise of NVIDIA. But beyond the economic and technical factors, there are human ones too. To understand the AI bubble is to understand why CEOs do the things they do. Because an executive job is so vague, they can telegraph the value of their labor by spending money on initiatives and partnerships and stratagem. AI gave hyperscalers the excuse to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on data centers and buy a bunch of GPUs to go in them, because that to the markets looks like they're doing something. By virtue of spending a lot of money in a frighteningly short amount of time, Satya Nadella received multiple glossy profiles, all without having to prove that AI can really do anything, be it a job or make Microsoft money. Nevertheless, AI allowed CEOs to look busy, and once the markets and journalists had agreed on the consensus opinion that AI would be big, all that these executives had to do was buy GPUs and do AI, or plug AI within their own software products, but really it was just jump on the big stupid arsehole train.
No,
Run a business and not thinking about podcasting? Think again. More Americans listen to podcasts than ad-supported streaming music from Spotify and Pandora. And as the #1 podcaster, iHeart's
I already
twice
read
as
this
large
guy's
as the
article. I
next
think
two
I linked it to you.
So whatever your
But I was
customers
curious
listen
if
to, they'll hear
he
your
supposedly had a
message.
guest
Plus,
on
only
the
iHeart can
podcast.
extend your message to audiences across broadcast radio. Think podcasting can help your business? Think iHeart. Streaming, radio, and podcasting. Let us show you at iHeartAdvertising.com. That's iHeartAdvertising.com.
So,
Hey sis,
on
what if I
this...
could promise you never had to listen to a condescending finance bro tell you how to manage your
Oops,
money
that's
again?
not it.
Welcome to Brown Ambition. This is the hard part when you pay down those credit cards. If you haven't gotten to the bottom of why you were racking up credit or turning to credit cards, you may just recreate the same
if we're
problem
on
a year
this,
from now. When you do
like,
feel like you are bleeding
it doesn't
from
actually
these high
matter
interest
on
rates,
those
I would
special
start
events,
shopping for a
like,
debt
that somebody
consolidation loan,
battles
starting
somebody,
with
right?
your
Like,
local
that's
credit
not actually
union,
important,
shopping
right?
around online,
They're just
looking
like
for some
text.
online online lenders because they tend to have fewer fees and be more affordable. Listen, I am not here to judge. It is so expensive in these streets. I 100% can see how in just a few months you can have this much credit card debt and it weighs on you. It's really easy to just like stick your head in the sand. It's nice and dark in the sand. Even if it's scary, it's not going to go away just because you're avoiding it, and in fact, it may get even worse. For more judgment-free money advice, listen to Brown Ambition on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It may look different, but Native culture is very alive. My name is Nicole Garcia, and on Burn Sage, Burn Bridges, we aim to explore that culture.
It was a huge honor to become a television writer because it does feel oddly like very traditional. It feels like Bob Dylan going electric, that this is something we've been doing for like hundreds of years. You carry with you a sense of purpose and confidence.
That's Sierra Teller Ornelas, who with Rutherford Falls became the first Native showrunner in television history. On the podcast Burn Sage, Burn Bridges, we explore her story along with other Native stories, such as the creation of the first Native Comic-Con or the importance
I would
of
like to level up
basketball.
somebody else, but
Every day,
I don't
Native
feel I can.
people are striving to keep traditions alive while navigating the modern world, influencing and bringing our culture into the mainstream. Listen to Burn Sage, Burn Bridges on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Caesars Sportsbook app gives you more with Caesars Rewards. Earn perks on every game with your bet. Download the app using promo code Radio20X and place your first bet of $1 or more for a chance to double your winnings on your next 20 bets. Open to new users in Michigan who are 21 or older. Max bet of $25 for boosted winnings. Max additional winnings $2,500 per bet. Profit boost tokens expire 14 days after receipt. See Caesars.com/promos for full terms. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
We are in the midst of one of the darkest forms of software in history, described by many as unwanted guests invading their products, their social media feeds, their bosses' empty minds, and resting in the hands of monsters. Every story of AI's success feels bereft of any real triumph, with every literal description of its abilities involving multiple caveats about the mistakes it makes or the incredible costs of running it. Generative AI really exists for two reasons: to cost money and to make executives look busy. It was meant to be the new enterprise software and the new iPhone and the new Netflix all at once. A panacea where the software guys pay one hardware guy for GPUs to unlock the incredible value creation of the future. In many ways, generative AI was always set up to fail because it was meant to be everything, was talked about like it was everything. It's still sold like it's everything, yet for all the fucking hype, it comes down to two companies, OpenAI and NVIDIA. And NVIDIA was, for a while, living high on the hog. All CEO Jensen Huang had to do every 3 months would say, "Check out these numbers," and the markets and business journalists would squeal with glee, even as he said stuff like, "The more you buy, the more you save," in part tipping his head to the very real and sensible idea of accelerated computing, but framed within the context of the cash inferno that's generative AI. And it all seems kind of fucking ludicrous. Huang's showmanship worked really well for NVIDIA for a while, because for a while the growth was easy. Everybody was buying GPUs. Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and to a lesser extent Apple and Tesla made up 42% of NVIDIA's revenue, creating, at least for the first four, a degree of shared mania where everybody justified buying tens of billions of dollars of GPUs by saying, "The other guy's doing it." This is one of the major reasons the AI bubble is happening, because people conflated NVIDIA's incredible sales with interest in AI, rather than everybody buying GPUs at once. Don't worry, I'll explain the revenue side a little bit later. We're here for the long haul. Sit down, get comfy, you're going to need to be. Anyway, NVIDIA is now facing a big problem. The only thing that grows forever is cancer. On September 9th, 2025, the Wall Street Journal said that NVIDIA's wow factor was fading, going from beating analyst estimates by nearly 21% in its fiscal year Q2 2024 earnings to scraping by with a pathetic, measly 1.52% beat in its most recent earnings, something that for any other company would be a good thing, because they made so much money, but framed against the delusional expectations that generative AI has inspired, well, the figure looks nothing short of ominous. I quote the Wall Street Journal. Already, NVIDIA's 56% annual revenue growth rate in its latest quarter was its slowest in more than 2 years. If analyst projections hold, growth will slow further in the current quarter. In any other scenario, 56% year-over-year growth would lead to an abundance of Dom Perignon and Huang signing hundreds of boobs, but this is NVIDIA, and that's just not good enough. Back in February 2024, NVIDIA was booking 265% year-over-year growth, but in its February 2025 earnings, NVIDIA only grew by a measly, pathetic, disgusting 78% year-over-year. I'm being sarcastic, of course. It isn't so much that NVIDIA isn't growing, but to grow year-over-year at the rates that people expect is insane. Life was a lot easier when NVIDIA went from $6.05 billion in revenue in Q4 fiscal year 2025 to $22 billion in revenue in Q4 fiscal year 2024. But for it to grow even 55% year over year from Q2 FY 2026, I'm just going to truncate that now, which was $46.7 billion, to Q2 2027, that would require them to make $72.385 billion in revenue in the space of 3 months, mostly from selling GPUs, which make up about 88% of its revenue. Just want to be clear there. In a year, they would have to make $72 billion just selling pretty much GPUs and the associated hardware in the space of 3 months. It's insane. This is really that it's too much. It's too much to expect. And this, by the way, would put NVIDIA in the ballpark of Microsoft, who made $76 billion in their last quarterly earnings, and within the neighborhood of Apple, who made $94 billion in their last quarter of earnings. And they would do this predominantly making money in an industry that a year and a half ago barely made the company $6 billion in a quarter. And the market needs NVIDIA to perform. They must, as the company makes up 7 to 8% of the value of the S&P 500. It's not enough for NVIDIA to be wildly profitable or to have a monopsony on selling GPUs or for it to have effectively 10x their stock in a few years. No, more, always more. Number must go up. It must continue to grow at the fastest rate of anything ever, making more and more money, selling more and more of these GPUs to a small group of companies that immediately start losing money the moment they plug them in. It's not brilliant, is it? While a few members of the Magnificent Seven could be depended on to funnel tens of billions of dollars into a furnace each quarter, there were limits, even for companies like Microsoft, which had bought over 485,000 GPUs in 2024 alone. To take a step back about how people actually make money from buying these GPUs, companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon make their money by either selling access to large language models that people incorporate into their products, or by renting out servers full of those GPUs to run inference, the thing to generate the output, or train AI models for companies that develop and market their models themselves, namely Anthropic and OpenAI, with some smaller competitors that don't really matter. That latter revenue stream, renting out GPUs, is where Jensen Huang found a solution to that horrible eternal growth problem: the NeoCloud. Namely, companies like CoreWeave, Lambda, and Nebius. Now, these businesses are fairly straightforward. They own or lease data centers that they then fill full of servers that are full of NVIDIA GPUs, which they then rent out on an hourly basis to customers, either on a per GPU basis or in large batches for large customers who guarantee they'll use a certain amount of compute and sign up for a long-term agreement for more than an hour at a time, couple years perhaps. These larger commitments. A NeoCloud is a specialist cloud compute company that exists only to provide access to GPUs for AI, unlike Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, all of which have healthy businesses selling other kinds of compute, with AI, as I'll get into later, failing to provide much of a return on investment at all. It's not just the fact that these companies are more specialized than, say, AWS or Azure. As you've gathered from the name, these are new, young, and in almost all cases incredibly precarious businesses, each with financial circumstances that would make a Greek finance minister blush. That's because setting up a NeoCloud is expensive. Even if the company in question already has data centers, as CoreWeave did with its cryptocurrency mining operation, AI requires, as I said, completely new data center infrastructure to run and cool the GPUs. And those GPUs also need paying for, and then there's the other stuff I mentioned earlier, like power, water, and the other bits of the computer, CPU, motherboard, blah, 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 blah. As a result, these NeoClouds are forced to raise billions of dollars in debt, which they collateralize using the GPUs they already have, along with contracts from customers, which they then use to buy more GPUs. That's right, they buy GPUs from NVIDIA, they raise debt on those GPUs, and then they use that debt to buy more GPUs from NVIDIA. It's enough to drive man insane. CoreWeave, for example, has $25 billion in debt on an estimated $5.35 billion of revenue in 2025, losing hundreds of millions of dollars per quarter. Now, you know who also invests in these NeoClouds? You'll never guess. It's NVIDIA. NVIDIA is also one of CoreWeave's largest customers, accounting for 15% of its revenue in 2024, and just signed a deal to buy $6.3 billion of any capacity that CoreWeave can't otherwise sell to someone else through 2032, an extension of a $1.3 billion 2023 deal, reported by the information. It was also the anchor investment in CoreWeave's IPO, about $250 million. NVIDIA is currently doing the same thing with Lambda, another neocloud that NVIDIA invested in, which also plans to go public next year. NVIDIA is also one of Lambda's largest customers, signing a deal with it this summer to rent 10,000 GPUs for $1.3 billion over 4 years. In the UK, NVIDIA has also just invested $700 million in Nscale, a former crypto miner that has never built an AI data center, that has, despite having no experience, committed $1 billion or 100,000 GPUs to an OpenAI data center in Norway. On Thursday, September 25th, Nscale announced that it closed another funding round with NVIDIA listed as the main backer, although it's unclear how much money it put in. It would be safe to assume it's probably at least $100 million. NVIDIA also invested in Nebius, an outgrowth of Russian conglomerate Yandex, and Nebius provides, through their partnership with NVIDIA, tens of thousands of dollars of compute credits to companies NVIDIA's Inception startup program. Look, NVIDIA's plan is simple. Fund these neoclouds, let these neoclouds load themselves up with debt, at which point they buy bunches of GPUs from NVIDIA, which can then be used as collateral for loans along with contracts from customers, allowing the neoclouds to buy even more GPUs from NVIDIA. It is just that simple. It's infinite money, right? Just money me, money now. You fund the company buys from you fund them again, they've used the thing they bought to buy more from you. Unlimited money. Except that is for one small problem. These companies don't don't really appear to have that many customers, and they don't appear to be making much money.
Might have been the elixir. That could have been the elixir down. Castor is just getting shot up.
As I went into in a recent premium newsletter, NVIDIA funds and sustains neoclouds as a way of funneling revenue to itself, as well as partners like Supermicro and Dell, resellers that take NVIDIA GPUs, like I mentioned, and put them in service to sell pre-built to customers. These two companies made up 39% of NVIDIA's revenues last quarter. Yet when you remove hyperscaler revenue, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, OpenAI, and NVIDIA from the revenues of these neoclouds, there's barely $1 billion in revenue combined across CoreWeave, Nebius, and Lambda. CoreWeave's $5.35 billion in revenue is predominantly made up with its contracts with NVIDIA, Microsoft, who are offering that compute to OpenAI, Google, who have hired CoreWeave to offer compute to OpenAI, and I'm not kidding, and of course OpenAI itself, which has now promised CoreWeave $22.4 billion in business over the next 5 years. This is all a lot of stuff, so I'll make it really simple. There's no real money in offering AI compute, but that isn't Jensen Huang's problem, so we simply will force NVIDIA to hand money to these companies so that they have contracts to point at, so they can raise debt to buy more of those GPUs, so that NVIDIA can give them more contracts, so they can use that to raise more money. It's really bad, alright? It's really bad. When I read this stuff out loud, I feel a little crazy, because it's so obviously unsustainable. Neoclouds are effectively giant private equity vehicles that exist to raise money to buy GPUs from NVIDIA, or for hyperscalers to move money around so they don't have to increase their capital expenditures and can, as Microsoft did earlier in the year, simply walk away from deals they don't like with the masses of data center leases they've walked from. Nebius recently signed a $17.4 billion deal with Microsoft, which even included a clause in its 6K filing, an official filing with the government, that Microsoft can terminate the deal in the event that the capacity isn't built by the delivery dates. And by the way, Nebius already used the contract that Microsoft gave them to raise $3 billion to, I'm not shitting you here, build the data center to actually provide the compute for the contract. They don't have it yet. They don't have the fucking compute. They haven't fucking built it. No one built it. They haven't got the compute, mate. These fucking companies, alright. Anyway, sorry, I'll stop spiraling. Let me just break down these numbers. Let's look at CoreWeave first. Microsoft, they're 60% of their revenue in 2024, and they're providing compute mostly for OpenAI. 15% of their revenue last year was NVIDIA, and then the rest was Meta, and then OpenAI, and then Google. Lambda, half of their revenue comes from Amazon and Microsoft, and now $1.5 billion of their revenue comes from NVIDIA, which their current revenue, by the way, and that $1.5 billion over 4 years, so the current revenue is $250 million. Well, that would make NVIDIA their largest customer. I realize I'm just saying numbers here, but for real with that contract, because Lambda only made $250 million in the first half of this year, and Nvidia is spreading $1.5 billion across 4 years, Nvidia is the largest customer now. Now, Nebius has got similar revenue to Lambda, but their largest customer is now... It's fucking Microsoft. It's just... They don't have real customers. They just have hyperscalers, or Nvidia themselves. And from my analysis, it appears that CoreWeave, despite expectations to make that $5.35 billion this year, has only around $500 million of non-Magnificent 7 or OpenAI revenue in 2025, with Lambda estimated to have maybe around of $100 million in AI revenue otherwise, and Nebius only around $250 million. And that's being generous. In much simpler terms, the Magnificent 7 is the AI bubble, and the AI bubble exists to buy more GPUs because, as I'll talk about, there's no real money or growth coming out of this other than the amount that private credit is investing, and this really is quite worrying, by the way. I had a quote here for an analyst that says it's about $50 billion a quarter for the low end for the past 3 quarters. So why is this bad? Alright, I don't know. Let's start simple. $50 billion a quarter of data center funding is going into an industry that has less revenue than free-to-play mobile game Genshin Impact. That feels pretty bad. Who's going to use these data centers? How are they even going to make money on them? Private equity firms don't typically hold on to assets. They sell them or they take them public. That doesn't seem great to me. Anyway, if AI was truly the next big growth vehicle, neoclouds would be swimming in diverse global revenue streams. Instead, they're heavily centralized around the same few names, one of which, Nvidia, directly benefits from their existence not as a company doing business, but as an entity that can accrue debt and spend money on GPUs. These neoclouds are entirely dependent on a continual flow of private credit from firms like Goldman Sachs, who's backed Nebius, CoreWeave, and Lambda, JP Morgan, Lambda, Crusoe, building Abilene, Texas's OpenAI data center, and of course CoreWeave, and Blackstone, Lambda, and CoreWeave, who have in a very real sense created an entirely debt-based infrastructure to feed billions of dollars directly to Nvidia, all in the name of an AI revolution that's yet to arrive. The fact that the rest of the NeoCloud revenue stream is effectively either a hyperscaler or OpenAI is also concerning. Hyperscalers are, at this point, the majority of data center capital expenditures, and have yet to prove any kind of success from building out this capacity, outside, of course, Microsoft's investment in OpenAI, which has succeeded in generating revenue while burning billions of dollars of revenue on, well, I mean, it's not really any profit, is there? Just burning money. It's also insane. When you say this stuff, I've got 2 more goddamn episodes of this, and when I read these scripts, I'm just like, how is nobody else more freaked out? Oh well. Hyperscaler revenue is also capricious, but even if it isn't, why are there no other major customers? Why across all of these companies does there not seem to be one major customer who isn't OpenAI? Well, the answers are quite obvious. Nobody that wants it can afford it, and those that can afford it don't need it. It's also unclear what exactly hyperscalers are doing with this compute, because it sure isn't making money. While Microsoft makes $10 billion in revenue from renting compute to OpenAI via their Microsoft Azure cloud, it does so at cost, and was charging OpenAI $1.30 per hour for each A100 AI GPU it rents, a loss of $2.2 an hour per GPU,
Crazy.
Meaning that it is likely losing money on this compute, especially as semi-analysis has the total cost per hour per GPU at around $1.46 with the cost of capital and debt associated for a hyperscaler, though it's unclear whether that's for an H100 or an A100 GPU. In any case, how do these neoclouds pay for their debt if the hyperscalers give up, or Nvidia doesn't send them money, or more likely, private credit begins to notice that there's no real revenue growth outside of circular compute deals with neoclouds' the largest suppliers, investors, and customers? Don't know why I said plural there, because it's just one, Nvidia. And the answer is they don't. In fact, I have serious concerns that they can't even build the capacity necessary to fulfill these deals, but nobody seems to worry or think about them. But really though, it appears to be taking Oracle and Crusoe around 2.5 years per gigawatt of compute capacity. How exactly are any of these neoclouds, or indeed Oracle itself, able to expand to capture this revenue? Who knows, but I assume somebody is going to say OpenAI. Here's an insane statistic for you, by the way. OpenAI will account for, in both its revenue, projected $13 billion, and in its own compute cost, $10, somewhere in the region of 40 to 50% of all AI revenues in 2025. As a reminder, OpenAI has leaked that it will burn $115 billion in the next 4 years, and based on my estimates, it actually needs to raise, upwards of $400 billion in the next 4 years based on its $300 billion deal with Oracle and some recently announced $100 billion compute purchases for backup. And that alone is a very bad sign. Very, very bad indeed, especially as we're 3 years and $500 billion or more into this hype cycle, with few signs of life outside of, well, OpenAI promising people money. And that's not healthy or sane or normal, and it's certainly not stable. And it's gonna get bad real fast. Catch you tomorrow.
This is an iHeart podcast. Run a business and not thinking about
Michigan than ever before, and bringing the latest research and treatments closer to you.
Because the costs of running
Michigan than ever before, do we? Michigan Answers at michigananswers.org.
Right now at Value City Furniture, get up to 20% off your new living room and more throughout the store. Think you deserve more? Same. Get no interest financing for up to 40 months. See if you pre-qualify without touching your credit score. Yep, get more at Value City Furniture while paying less. And just in time for cozy season and football. More style, more quality, more value. We are Value City Furniture.
What a terrible level up. Oh, he's maxed already, isn't he?
Hello and welcome to Better Offline. I'm, of course, your host, Ed Zitron. We're in the third episode of our 4-part series where I give you a comprehensive explanation as to the origins of the AI bubble, the mythology sustaining it, and why it's destined to end really, really badly. Now, if you're jumping in now, please start from the very beginning. The reason why this is a 4-parter, my first ever, is because I want it to be comprehensive and because this is a very big subject with a lot of moving parts and even more bullshit. A few weeks ago, I published a premium newsletter that explained how everybody is losing money on generative AI, in part because the costs of running AI models is increasing, and in part because the software itself doesn't do enough to warrant the costs associated with running them, which are already subsidized and unprofitable for the model providers. Outside of OpenAI, and to a lesser extent Anthropic, nobody seems to be making much revenue, with the most successful company being Anysphere, makers of AI coding tool Cursor, which hit $500 million of annualized, so 41.6 million in 1 month, a few months ago, just before Anthropic and OpenAI jacked up the prices for priority processing on enterprise queries, raising their operating costs as a result. In any case, that's some piss-poor revenue for an industry that's meant to be the future of software. Smartwatches are projected to make $32 billion this year, and as I've mentioned in the past, the Magnificent Seven expect to make $35 billion or so in revenue from AI this year, and I think in total, when you throw in CoreWeave and all them, it's barely $55 billion in total. Even Anthropic and OpenAI seem a little lethargic, both burning billions of dollars while making, by my estimates, no more than $2 billion in Anthropic's case this year so far, and $6.26 billion in 2025 so far for OpenAI, despite projections of $5 billion and $13 billion respectively. Outside of these two, AI startups are floundering, struggling to stay alive and raising money in several $100 million bursts as their negative gross margin businesses flounder. As I dug into a few months ago, I could find only 12 AI-powered companies making more than $8.3 million a month, with 2 of them slightly improving their revenues, specifically AI search company Perplexity, which has now hit $150 million in ARR or $12.5 million a month, and AI coding startup Replit, which has hit the same amount. Both of these companies burn ridiculous amounts of money. Perplexity burned 164% of its revenue on Amazon Web Services, OpenAI, and Anthropic last year, and while Replit hasn't leaked its costs, the information reports its gross margins in July were 23%, which doesn't include the cost of its free users, which you simply have to do with LLMs, as free users are capable of costing you a shit ton of money. And some of you might say, that's how they do it in software. Well, guess what? Software doesn't usually connect you to a model that can burn, I don't know, 10 cents, 20 cents every time they touch it, which may not seem like much, but when you're making $3 on someone and they don't convert, it does. Problematically, your paid users also cost you more than they bring in as well. In fact, every user loses you money in generative AI because it's impossible to do cost control in a consistent manner. A few months ago, I did a piece on Anthropic losing money on every single Claude Code subscriber, and now I'm going to walk you through the whole story in a simplified fashion because it's quite important. So Claude Code is a coding environment that people used, or I should really say tried to use, to build software using generative AI. It's available as part of Anthropic's $20, $100, and $200 a month Claude subscriptions, with the more expensive subscriptions having more generous rate limits. Generally, these subscriptions are all you can eat. You can use them as much as you want until you hit limits rather than paying for the actual tokens you burn. When I say burn tokens, and someone reached out saying I should specify this, I'm describing how these models are traditionally billed. In general, you'll build at $1 per million input tokens, as in user feeding in data, and output tokens, the output created. So you wouldn't get one token build, so every million you get charged. So for example, Anthropic charges $3 per million input tokens and 6 million per output tokens to use its Claude Sonnet 4 model. And it's about, I think, a word per 4 tokens. I should really look that up. It also gets more complex as you get into things like generating code. Nevertheless, Claude Code has been quite popular. And a user created a program called CC Usage, which allowed you to see your token burn. The amount of tokens you were actually burning using Anthropic's models while using Claude Code, versus just getting charged a month and not knowing, and many were seeing that they were burning in excess of their monthly spend.
Wow.
To be clear, this is the token price based on Anthropic's own pricing, and thus the cost to Anthropic are likely not identical. So I got a little clever. Using Anthropic's gross profit margins, I chose 55%, and then a few weeks after my article, 60% was leaked. I found at least 20 different accounts of people costing Anthropic anywhere from 130% to 3,084% of their subscription. There's also now a leaderboard called Vibrank, where people compete to see how much they burn, with the current leader burning, and I shit you not, $51,291 over the course of a month. Anthropic is, to be clear, the second largest model developer and has some of the best AI talent in the industry. It has a better handle on its infrastructure than anyone outside of big tech and OpenAI, and it still cannot seem to fix this problem, even with weekly rate limits brought in at the end of August. While one could assume that Anthropic is simply letting users run wild, my theory is far simpler. Even the model developers have no real way of limiting user activity, likely due to the architecture of generative AI. I know it sounds insane, but at the most advanced level, even there, model providers are still prompting their models, and whatever rate limits may be in place appear to, at times, get completely ignored, and there doesn't seem to be anything they can do to stop it. Now really, Anthropic counts amongst its capitalist apex predators one lone Chinese man who spent $50,000 of their compute in the space of a month fucking around with Claude Code. Even if Anthropic was profitable, it isn't, and will burn billions of dollars this year. A customer paying $200 a month ran up $50,000 in costs, immediately devouring the margin of any user running the service that day, that week, or even that month. Even if Anthropic's costs are half the published rates, they're not, by the way. One guy amounted to 125 users worth of monthly revenue. This is not a real business. That's a bad business with out-of-control costs, and it doesn't appear anybody has these costs under control. And faced with the grim reality ahead of them, these companies are trying nasty little tricks on their customers to juice more revenue from them. A few weeks ago, Replit, an unprofitable AI coding company, released a product called Agent 3, which promised to be 10 times more autonomous and offer infinitely more possibilities, testing and fixing its code, constantly improving your application behind the scenes in a reflection loop. Sounds very real. Sounds extremely real. It's so real, but actually it isn't. In reality, this means you go and tell the model to build something, and it would go and do it, and you'll be shocked to hear that these models can't be relied upon to go and do anything. Please note that this was launched a few months after Replit raised their prices, shifting to obfuscated effort-based pricing that would charge the full scope of the agent's work, and if you're wondering what the fuck that means, so are their customers. Agent 3 has been a disaster. Users found the tasks that previously cost a few dollars were spiraling into the hundreds of dollars, with the register reporting one customer found themselves with a $1,000 bill after a week, and I quote them. I think it's just launch pricing adjustment. Some tasks on new apps ran over an hour and 45 minutes and only charged $4 to $6, but editing pre-existing apps seems to cost most overall. I spent $1K this week alone. And they told that to the register, by the way. Another user complained that costs skyrocketed without any concrete results, and I quote the register here. I typically spent between $100 and $250 a month. I blew through $70 in a night at Agent 3 launch, and another Redditor wrote, alleging the new tool also performed some questionable actions. One prompt brute forced its way through authentication, redoing auth and hard resetting a user's password to what it wanted to perform app testing on a form, the user wrote. I realize that's a little nonsensical, but long story short, it did a bunch of shit it wasn't asked to. As I previously reported, in late May, early June, both OpenAI and Anthropic cranked up the pricing on their enterprise customers, leading Replit and Cursor both shifting their prices upward. This abuse has now trickled down to the customers. Replit has now released an update that lets you choose how autonomous you want Agent 3 to be, which is a tacit admission that you can't trust coding LLMs to build software. Replit's users are still pissed off, complaining that Replit is charging them for an activity when the agent doesn't do anything, a consistent problem I've found across Redditors. While Reddit is not the full summation of all users of every company everywhere, it's a fairly good barometer of user sentiment, and man, are users pissy. And now here's why this is bad. Traditionally, Silicon Valley startups have relied upon the same model of grow really fast and burn a bunch of money, then turn the profit lever. AI does not have a profit lever because the raw costs of providing access to AI models are so high, and they're only increasing, that the basic economics of how the tech industry sells software don't make sense.
Run a business and not thinking about podcasting? Think again. More Americans listen to podcasts than ad-supported streaming music from Spotify and Pandora. And as the #1 podcaster, iHeart's twice as large as the next two combined. So whatever your customers listen to, they'll hear your message. Plus, only iHeart can extend your message to audiences across broadcast radio. Think podcasting can help your business? Think iHeart. Streaming, radio, and podcasting. Let us show you at iHeartAdvertising.com. That's iHeartAdvertising.com.
Hey, this is Matt Jones.
I'm Drew Franklin.
And this is NFL Cover Zero. We're just here to try to give you an NFL perspective a little bit different.
Did you see the Colts pretzel? That was my other big takeaway from that game.
What was that? Oh my! We think NFL coverage should be informative and entertaining. And twice a week, that is exactly what you're going to get. Listen to NFL Cover Zero with Matt Jones and Drew Franklin on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. Visit toyota.com/NFL now to learn more.
But the humility in knowing that life is this classroom that we should never graduate from is what is going to keep you growing. And that's all that matters. World Mental Health Day is around the corner. And on my podcast, Just Heal with Dr. J, I dive into what it really means to care for your mind, body, and spirit. From breaking generational patterns to building emotional capacity, healing is a journey and wholeness is the destination.
I'm gonna walk away feeling very healed and feeling like, yes, I'm gonna continue my healing journey and I'm gonna get some keys from you.
Listen to Just Heal with Dr. J from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you want to hear the secrets of serial killers, psychopaths, pedophiles, robbers?
They are sitting there waiting for the vulnerable thing. They're waiting for the unprotected.
I'm Dr. Leslie, forensic psychologist. I advocate for safety and awareness of predators while wearing pink.
When you were described to me as a forensic psychologist, I was like, snooze. We ended up talking for hours, and I was like, this girl is my best friend.
This is a podcast where I cut through the noise with sarcasm, satire, and hard truths.
I'm not going to fake it and force it.
Would you force an orgasm? Because that's like a different layer. The car accident you didn't want to see but couldn't turn away from. In this episode, I
Who needs a heel
tape? Tools, instincts, and strategies to protect yourself and your loved ones in everyday life and high-risk situations. Listen to Intentionally Disturbing on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, they can sort of get in here? I don't know.
I'll reiterate something I wrote a few weeks ago. A large language model user's infrastructural burden varies wildly between users and use cases. While somebody asking ChatGPT to summarize an email might not be much of a burden, somebody asking ChatGPT to review hundreds of pages of documents at once, a core feature of basically any $20 a month subscription, could eat up to 8 GPUs at once. To be very clear, a user that pays $20 a month could run multiple queries like this a month, and there's not really a way to stop them. Unlike most software products, any errors in producing an output from a large language model have a significant opportunity cost. When a user doesn't like an output or the model gets something wrong, which it's guaranteed to do, or the user realizes they forgot something, the model must make a further generation or generations, and even with caching, which Anthropic has added a toll to, there's a definitive cost attached to any mistake. Large language models are, for the most part, lacking in any definitive use cases, meaning that every user is, even with an idea of what they want to do, experimenting with every input and output. In doing so, they create the opportunity to burn more tokens, which in turn creates an infrastructural burn on GPUs, which cost a lot of money to run. The more specific the output, the more opportunities there are for monstrous token burn, and I'm specifically thinking about coding with LLMs. The token-heavy nature of generating code means that any mistakes, suboptimal generations, or straight-up errors will guarantee further token burn. Even efforts to reduce compute costs by, for example, pushing free users or those on cheap plans to smaller, less intensive models have dubious efficacy. As I talked about in the previous episode, OpenAI's splitter model in the GPT version of ChatGPT requires vast amounts of additional compute in order to route the user's request to the appropriate model, with simpler requests going to smaller models and more complex ones being shifted to reasoning models, and it makes it impossible to cache part of the input. As a result, it's not really clear whether it's saving OpenAI any money, and indeed kind of suggests it might be costing them more. In simpler terms, it's very, very, very difficult to imagine what one user, free or otherwise, might cost, and thus it's hard to charge them anything on a monthly basis or tell them what a service might actually cost them on average. And this is a huge, huge problem with AI coding environments. But let's talk about Claude Code again, Anthropic's code generator tool. According to the information, Claude Code was driving nearly $400 million in annualized revenue, roughly doubling from a few weeks ago on July 31st, 2025. The annualized revenue works out to about $33 million a month in revenue for a company that predicts it will make at least $416 million a month by the end of the year, and for a product that has become, for a time, the most popular coding environment in the world from the second largest and best funded AI company in the world. Is that it? Is that fucking it? Is that all that's happening here? $33 million, all of which is unprofitable, after it felt, at least based on social media chatter and discussing with multiple different engineers, that Claude Code had become ubiquitous with anything to do with LLMs and coding. To be clear, Anthropic's Sonnet and Opus models are consistently some of the most popular for programming on OpenRouter, an aggregator of LLM usage, and Anthropic has been consistently named as the best at coding. Whether or not I feel that way is irrelevant. Some bright spark out there is going to say that Microsoft's GitHub Copilot has 1.8 million paying subscribers, and guess what? That's true. In fact, I reported it. Here's another fun fact. The Wall Street Journal reported that Microsoft loses on average $20 a month per user, with some users costing the company as much as $80. And that's for the most popular product. But wait. Hold up. Wait. I read some shit in the newspaper. Aren't these LLM code generators replacing actual human engineers? And thus, even if they cost way more than $20, $100, or $200 a month, they're still worth it, right? They're replacing an entire engineer. Oh, my sweet summer child. If you believe the New York Times or other outlets that simply copy and paste whatever Anthropic CEO Wario Amadei says, you'd think that the reason that software engineers are having trouble finding work is because their jobs are being replaced by AI. This grotesque, manipulative, abusive, and offensive lie has been propagated through the entire business and tech media without anybody sitting down and asking whether it's true, or even getting a good understanding of what it is that LLMs can actually do with code. Members of the media, I am begging you, stop doing this. Stop publishing these fucking headlines. You're embarrassing yourself. Every asshole is willing to give a quote saying that coding is dead, and that every executive is willing to burp out some nonsense about replacing all of their engineers. But I'm fucking begging you to either use these things yourself or speak to people that do. I am not a coder. I cannot write or read code. Nevertheless, I'm capable of learning, and have spoken to numerous software engineers in the last few months, and basically, I've reached a consensus of this is kind of useful sometimes. However, one time a very silly man with an increasingly squeaky voice said that I don't speak to people who use AI tools, so I went and spoke to 3 notable, experienced software engineers and asked them to give me the straight truth about what coding LLMs can do. Now, for the purposes of brevity, I'm going to use select quotes from what these people said, but if you want to read the whole thing, you can check out the newsletter. First, I'm going to read what Carl Brown of the Internet of Bugs said, and I had him on the show a few months back. He's fantastic. So, most of the advancements in programming languages, technique, and craft in the last 40 years have been designing safer and better ways of tying these blocks together to create larger and larger programs with more complexity and functionality. Humans use these advancements to arrange these blocks in logical abstraction layers so we can fit an understanding of the layers' interconnections in our heads as we work. Diving into blocks temporarily is needed. This is where AIs fall down. The amount of context required to hold the interconnections between these blocks quickly grows beyond the AI's effective short-term memory, in practice much smaller than its advertised context window size, and the AIs lack the ability to reason about the abstractions as we do. This leads to real-world code that's illogically layered, hard to understand, debug, and maintain. Carl also said, code generation AIs from an industry standpoint are roughly the equivalent of a slightly below average computer science graduate fresh out of school without any real world experience, only ever having written programs to be printed and graded. That's bad because, as he pointed out, whereas LLMs can't get past this summer intern stage, actual humans get better. And if we're replacing the bottom rung of the labor market, there won't be any mid-level or senior developers later down the line. Next, I asked Nick Suresh of I Will Fucking Pile Drive You If You Mention AI Again what he thought. LLMs, he said, will sometimes solve a thorny problem for me in a few seconds, saving me some brain power. But in practice, the effort of articulating so much of the design work in plain English and hoping the LLM emits code that I find acceptable is frequently more work than just writing the code. For most problems, the hardest part is the thinking, and LLMs don't make that part any easier. I also talked to Colt Voji of No, AI is Not Making AI Engineers 10x as Productive, who we also had on the show recently, and he said this. LLMs often function like a fresh summer intern. They're good at solving the straightforward problems that coders learn about in school, but they are unworldly. They do not understand how to bring lots of solutions to small, straightforward problems together into a larger whole. They lack the experience to be wholly trusted, and trust is the most important thing you need to fully delegate coding tasks. In simpler terms, LLMs are capable of writing code but can't do software engineering because software engineering is the process of understanding, maintaining, and executing code to produce functional software. And LLMs do not learn, cannot adapt, and, to paraphrase something Carl Brown said to me, break down the more of your code and variables you ask them to look at once. So you can't replace a software engineer with them. If you are printing this in a media outlet and have heard this sentence, you are fucking up. You really are fucking up. I really need members of the media hearing this. You need to change. You need to change on this one. You are doing software engineers dirty.
Run a business and not thinking about podcasting? Think again. More Americans listen to podcasts than ad-supported streaming music from Spotify and Pandora. And as the #1 podcaster, iHeart's twice as large as the next two combined. So whatever your customers listen to, they'll hear your message. Plus, only iHeart can extend your message to audiences across broadcast radio. Think podcasting can help your business? Think iHeart. Streaming, radio, and podcasting. Let us show you at iHeartAdvertising.com. That's iHeartAdvertising.com.
Hey, this is Matt Jones.
I'm Drew Franklin.
And this is NFL Cover Zero. We're just here to try to give you an NFL perspective a little bit different.
Did you see the Colts pretzel? That was my other big takeaway from that game.
What was that? Oh my! We think NFL coverage should be informative and entertaining. And twice a week, that is exactly what you're going to get. Listen to NFL Cover Zero with Matt Jones and Drew Franklin on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. Visit toyota.com/NFL now to learn more.
But the humility in knowing that life is this classroom that we should never graduate from is what is going to keep you growing. And that's all that matters.
World Mental Health Day is around the corner. And on my podcast, Just Healed with Dr. J, I dive into what it really means to care for your mind, body, and spirit. From breaking generational patterns to building emotional capacity. Healing is a journey, and wholeness is the destination.
I'm gonna walk away feeling very healed and feeling like, yes, I'm gonna continue my healing journey, and I'm gonna get some keys from you.
Listen to Just Healed with Dr. J from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you want to hear the secrets of serial killers, psychopaths, pedophiles, robbers?
They are sitting there waiting for the vulnerable thing. They're waiting for the unprotected.
I'm Dr. Leslie, serving on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get
so many
podcasts.
ads in this garbage.
Look, and I understand why too. It's very easy to believe that software engineering is just writing code, but the reality is that software engineers maintain software, which includes writing and analyzing code amongst a vast array of different personalities and programs and problems. Good software engineering harkens back to Brian Merchant's interviews with translators. While some may believe the translators simply tell you what words mean, true translation is communicating the meaning of a sentence, which is cultural, contextual, regional, and personal, and often requires the exercise of creativity and novel thinking. And on top of that, while translation is the production of words, you can't just take code and look at it. You actually need to know how code works and functions and why it functions in that way. Using an LLM, you'll never know because the LLM doesn't know anything either. Now, my editor Matt Hughes gave an example of this in his newsletter, which I think I'll paraphrase. He used to live in France, in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, and sometimes he'll read French translations of books to see how awkward bits of prose are translated. Doing those awkward bits requires a bit of creative thinking, and I quote, "Take Harry Potter. In French, Hogwarts is Poudlard, which translates into bacon lice. Why did they go with that instead of a literal translation of Hogwarts, which would be Veruspork?" I'm sorry to anyone who can actually read languages. No idea, but I'd assume it was something to do with the fact that Poudlard sounds a lot better than Veruspork, and both of them I can say flawlessly. Someone had to actually think about how to translate that one idea. They had to exercise creativity, which is something that an AI is inherently incapable of doing. Similarly, coding is not just a series of text that programs a computer, but a series of interconnected characters that refers to other software in other places that must also function now and explain on some level to someone who has never ever seen the code before why it was done in this way. This is, by the way, why we're still yet to get any tangible proof that AI is replacing software engineers, because it isn't replacing software engineers. And now we need to understand why this is so existentially bad for generative AI. Of all the fields supposedly at risk from AI disruption, coding feels or felt the most tangible, if only because the answer to "can you write code with LLMs" wasn't an immediate unilateral no. The media has also been quick to suggest that AI writes software, which is true in the same way that ChatGPT writes novels. In reality, LLMs can generate code and do some sort of software engineering adjacent tasks, but like all large language models, break down and go totally insane, hallucinating more and more as the tasks get more complex, and software engineering is extremely complex. Even software engineers, who can read code and have done so for decades, will find problems they can't solve just by looking at the code. And as I pointed out earlier, software engineering is not just coding. It involves thinking about problems, finding solutions to novel challenges, designing stuff in a way that can be read and maintained by others, and that's ideally scalable and secure. The whole fucking point of an AI is that you hand shit off to it. That's what they've been selling it as. That's why Jensen Huang told kids to stop learning to code, as with AI there's no point. And it was all a fucking lie. Generative AI can't do the job of a software engineer, and it fails, while also costing an abominable amount of money. Coding large language models seem like magic at first because they, to quote a conversation with Carl Brown, make the easy things easier, but they also make the harder things harder. They don't even speed up engineers. There's a study that showed they make them slower. Yet coding is basically the only obvious use case for LLMs. Oh, I'm sure you're going to say, but I bet the enterprise is doing well, and you're oh so very, very wrong. Microsoft, if you've ever switched on a TV in the past 2 years, has gone all in on generative AI, and despite being arguably the biggest software company in the world, at least in terms of desktop operating systems and productivity software, has made almost no traction in popularizing generative AI. It has thousands, if not tens of thousands of salespeople, and thousands of companies that literally sell Microsoft services for a living. And it can't sell AI. I've got a real fucking scoop for you. I'm so excited, and I buried it in the third part of a 4-part episode. I'm truly twisted. But a source that has seen materials related to sales has confirmed that, as of August 2025, Microsoft has around 8 million active licensed, so paying, users of Microsoft 365 Copilot, amounting to a 1.81% conversion rate across 440 million Microsoft 365 subscribers. Must be clear that 365 is their big cash cow. This would amount to, if each of these users paid annually at the full rate $30 a month, to about $2.88 billion in annual revenue for a product category that makes $33 billion a fucking quarter. That's productivity and business unit for Microsoft. And I must be clear, I am 100% sure these users aren't all paying $30 a month. The Information reported a few weeks ago that Microsoft has been reducing the software's price, referring to Microsoft 365, with more generous discounts on the AI features, according to customers and salespeople,
really?
heavily suggesting discounts have already been happening. Enterprise software is traditionally sold at a discount anyway, or put a different way, with bulk pricing for those who sign up a bunch of users at once. In fact, I found evidence that they've been doing this for a while, with a 15% discount on annual Microsoft 365 Copilot subscriptions for orders of 10 to 300 seats, mentioned by an IT consultant back in late 2024, and another that's currently running through September 30th, 2025, with another Microsoft Cloud Solution Provider program. Yeah, I found tons of other examples too. And Microsoft 365 is the enterprise version where they sell things with like Word and PowerPoint and sometimes Teams as well. This is probably their most popular product. And by the way, they even manipulate the numbers a little bit there. An active user is someone who has taken one action on any Microsoft 365 app with Copilot in the space of 28 days. Not 30, 28. That's so generous. Now I know, that word active. Maybe you're thinking, Ed, this is like the gym model. There are unpaid licenses that Microsoft is getting paid for. Fine, fucking fine. Let's assume that Microsoft also has, based on research that suggests this can be the case for some software companies, another 50%, 4 million, paying Copilot licenses that aren't being used. That's still 12 million users, which is around 2.7% conversion rate. That's piss poor, buddy. That's piss poor. That's pissy. It sucks. It's bad. Doo-doo. Well, I just said pee-pee, I guess. Anyway, very serious podcast. But why aren't people paying for Copilot? Well, let's hear from someone who talked to The Information, and I quote, "It's easy for an employee to say, yes, this will help me, but hard to quantify how. And if they can't quantify how it'll help them, it's not going to be a long discussion over whether the software is worth paying for." Is that good? Is that good? Is that what you want to hear? It isn't. That's the secret. It's not. It's bad. It's really bad. It's all very bad. And Microsoft 365 Copilot has been such a disaster that Microsoft will now integrate Anthropic's models to try and make them better. Oh, one other thing too. Sources also confirm GPU utilization, so how much the GPU is set aside for Microsoft 365. Yeah, their enterprise Copilot is barely scratching the 60%. I'm also hearing that SharePoint, which is an app they have with over 250 million users, has less than 300,000 weekly active users of their Copilot features, suggesting that people just don't want to fucking use this. Those numbers are from August, by the way. And it's pathetic. And I must be clear, if Microsoft's doing this badly, I don't know how anyone else is doing well. And they're not. They're all failing. It's pathetic. But I've spent a lot of time today talking about AI coding, because this was supposed to be the saving grace, the thing that actually turned this from a bubble into an actual money-minting industry that changes the world. And I wanted to bring up Microsoft 365 because that's the place where Microsoft should be making the most money. It's their most ubiquitous software. It's their most well-known software. And they're not. 8 million people. 8 million people. I've run that by a few people, and everyone's made the same "oh god" noise. It's quite weird. The "oh god" noise and the numbers. But this just isn't happening. Things are going badly, and it really only gets worse from here. And I'm going to tell you more tomorrow in the final part of our 4-parter. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening to Better Offline. The editor and composer of the Better Offline theme song is Matt Osowski. You can check out more of his music and audio projects at mattosowski.com. mattosowski.com. You can email me at easy@betteroffline.com or visit betteroffline.com to find more podcasts.
That's it. Oh, great, more reinforcement. can heal that off. I don't know, that one, just like that thief, doesn't want to move. Bad. How come I didn't hear the noise? But it's definitely broken out. I already hit my thing. reinforcements just keep coming. None of these guys hit him. I hate the waste of killer lands. I just want them down. Oops. Okay, peeked out. I don't think all can reach, though. Go. Are we out of... Oh, the music. We have the music. Dan's favorite. Oh god, there's still more. Don't stop coming and they don't stop coming. None of these guys have anything. Oh. All these guys are like relatively useless sounding. Probably something like this. Piss off. Piss off. All I'm trying to do is like move my people forward, and I'm just gonna get picked off. Bullshit. No way. I know those are the more dangerous one, guy. I know. I'm literally just trying to end the mission point. You know what, asshole? You do your bullshit. Let me guess, you just have short bow, high crit. Okay, whatever. Can't even get it done. Oh god, there's still more enemies. Oh boy, annoying. Probably just gonna reset here if this is so good. Got rid of the dangerous one though. Oh, it's the victory music again. So dumb. Oh, if he gets hit twice, we're just boned. Fantastic. Piss off, game. Like, for real. Hey, Shin, you're the only person who can do anything. He's so bad at this. He's bad at video game. trying to set up for the finish, and it's dumb. Respawn, just annoying. Eight has much better dodge. I wonder if we're done spawning reinforcements yet. Alright. More! Are they ever gonna stop? Like every turn, man. Stupid short bow crits. Great. Anyone kill him? Thank goodness. Jesus Christ, there's more. They just keep coming. Like, does it even say? What turn are we actually on? So that was it. That was the last reinforcement. Or so we think. All these cats can finally move back. Okay. I'm having to talk to all of these nomad camps. Yikes. A lot of damage. Oh, great, he's got a double bow. Brave bow and brave sword. Brilliant. Oh, these can't be interacted with. So it's all a trap or something? Is this just a cleverly laid trap? They're gonna like all spawn on top of me or something? Because they can. Oh, this seems bad. Here we go! They spawn bullshit. Are you kidding me? What a stupid mission. So our whole team has to block them. Like I knew. Alright, I'm reading the guide. Alright, I don't know if we can get this. Move everybody up. We're gonna try it. I don't think it's gonna work. Come on, dude. We can't miss every shot. That's a bit dumb. It's for 20. Wait, he got to attack twice first. How the hell are we dealing with this? I need stuff on the other side. It's probably just gonna be that Shin has to have the thing. right? It just has to have it. What is this fight? This fight's dumb. Actually dumb. Okay, we got him down. That was really dumb. Needed a bit of RNG luck there. But... So does this garbage still spawn? It still spawn. Wow. Assuming they're just gonna kill my guys, so... Fake Ike has to go end the mission. What even happens if Merlinus gets taken out? Getting out of here before I lose all my... Maybe you don't actually lose his stuff. I don't know. Either way, please just go end the mission. Vulgar. That's an awful lot of troops. Did I give him enough books? Like, is he gonna be okay? I think he actually would be okay, and we have, like, one staff. I assume somewhere near these villages is a, armory. There you are. Alright, I need to stop there because I gotta go. Yep, no healing wand is for sale though. I think I'll just make do. There are treasures available.